somewhere I'll find the button. All right, so we are recording now, just so everybody knows. So I'm Amanda Cox, and I'm going to be the referee manager for this season. So I want to take an opportunity to say hello to everybody and just make sure everybody knows what's going on with the program. Referees for the season. We have 10 total refs. Joe down here in the corner will be picking up a game or two. Everybody else will be doing, so Lee Bryant up here in the corner, some of her availability was really small, so she'll also only be doing 2 games. Everybody else gets 4, 5, 6 games apiece. 6 of the refs were with us last year, so they should look familiar. Jenny Liu is going to be joining us this year, as well as Steve Gore from Colorado and Julianne Zussman, who's from Canada. Does anybody have comments or questions about the refs? Cool. They're all super excited to be a part of this. It's a big deal. We really try to make ourselves like a small community, and we're really successful last year working together. We've got full support of 5 referee coaches and 3 performance reviewers going into the season. So that's exciting for us all. So thank you, actually, for letting us be a part of the WPL. From a travel standpoint, all of the flights are being purchased. We were purchased through week 6 at the moment. And that's all handled through funds that the teams put into a kitty and we buy flights out of. And then ground transportation, hopefully everybody knows it's going to be the same as it always has been. And the referees count on the teams to transport them if needed. Some of them have friends in the area, and so if they do, they'll be using their friends for transportation. Any questions there? Cool. Game day, just a few notes. Sorry, is somebody trying to say something?
Hey, Amanda, I just wanted to point out, this is Milla.
Hey, Milla.
To point out that this is different from last year when part of the deal was that host teams were responsible for travel logistics. So I know that there was some pushback or conversations had with teams last year. Okay. So for people on the call who were involved last year, just note that this is different.
So I'm still under the impression teams are handling ground transportation for the refs?
Right.
Okay.
But not accommodations.
Right. And unless for some reason we run out of hotel money, which it doesn't look like is going to happen at all. They're being super careful with your budget. Most of them are staying with friends when they travel.
Thanks.
Sure. Thank you. Just a few notes about game day. So the home teams, somebody may need to mute themselves. I'm not sure. Just check and make sure you're muted. Game day assistant referees are being coordinated by the home teams. We discussed water breaks today, and that decision will be made on the day by the coaches, captains, and the referees who are there at the game. When we do have water breaks, they will be 2 minutes at the 20s, and coaches are not supposed to come onto the field at the water break. Anybody have questions around water breaks, or it's pretty standard now?
Yeah, are the water breaks because of the weather, or is this like, are people trying to make this a regular thing?
Yeah, so it's usually because of weather, because of heat for player safety. So a lot of leagues have just decided, like the MLR, for instance, now has water breaks in all of their games across all of their matches because they decided it was the only fair way to do it. So the WPL has decided to leave that up to the players and the coaches on the day.
Okay, thanks.
Sure thing.
Hey, this is Milla again. If you have strong feelings otherwise, I think that was Tiffany talking, right?
Yeah, I know.
We are definitely open to like other input, but really at the end of the day, our decision around water breaks is most importantly around player safety. I think, we can all understand because we're starting in August now that there are really hot days that maybe don't really apply as much to, like, say, a game in Minnesota in late October. So that is
Georgia.
where the idea comes from.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
Georgia's going to be hot probably through October. So.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine it'd just be a cutoff temperature where it's just a rule, right? And then it's not a decision made each time. But
so the reason we don't have a temperature is, so for example, 80 degrees in the mid-Atlantic is super humid and really hot, whereas like 80 degrees in Oregon is like a kind of nice day.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. That's cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, if people disagree, we can discuss it, but that's kind of what the conclusion was that we came to.
Yeah.
Okay. So, technical zones, we are supposed to have technical zones at all of the matches. So everybody should be used to that by now, and there shouldn't be any issues. And the last piece is around film. All of the games are supposed to be filmed by the home team. And that process is outlined in the match film day protocol thing for the WPL. They're going to be uploaded to a Google Drive, which we will send you the link to. I don't think we've distributed that yet. And that's about it.
That went out this week.
Okay, super.
From Naima. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if I was on that, but anyway, regardless. Awesome. And I think that's all the game day stuff that I wanted to run by you. Does anybody have game day questions for me or for the match officials? Oh, one thing we should mention, we haven't really had it in this league yet, but a lot of times when the coaches end up having a good relationship with the referees, they like to reach out to them before the games. If you are going to do that, and feel free to do that, but if you do, try to keep the conversation limited to, is it okay my team does this conversation, rather than the opponent does this. Does that make sense? So we're happy to entertain discussions about your game, but we would rather not have conversations where you try to engage us on things that the other team does. Cool. So we're using Advantage again this year. Everyone should be familiar with that from last year. I would show you Advantage, but is currently going through an upgrade. So once the upgrade is through, everyone will get a link to sign up, and then you'll be able to go in there and poke around. And I'm more than happy to do online training with people who aren't familiar with it. It's a really nice piece of software that you will be able to go into and read all of the match official reviews after the games. You can use it to research referees, what they usually penalize, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and that sort of thing, so that you can game plan for your team. Do we have any questions about Advantage? Cool. Match official weekly schedule, just so you know, matches are going to happen Saturdays and Sundays. We need your video link as soon as possible. The sooner that we can start on things, the better. Monday by noon would be the absolute drop dead date. That gives the referee one day to watch their match and do their review, and then it gives their coach a day to do their review, and then it gives me one day to, or half a day, I guess, to sort of go through and pull out any sort of trends that we're seeing across all of the matches, so that we can have our call on Wednesdays at 9. And then on Thursdays, matches, they'll be published so that you can see the reports Wednesday evening, usually after the call, or Thursday morning, depending on if we get a little bit behind. On Thursdays, I will send an email out to all of the teams, just sort of going through any trends or things that we discussed as a match official group. And then we just get ready and we do it all over again. What I would challenge you guys with is, if at any time you have a question about your game, please just reach out, send me the time of the match so that we can have a discussion. We didn't have a lot of that sort of back and forth dialogue last year. There was a bit of it, but I mean, that's what I'm here for, so please take advantage of it. All right, that's about all I have sort of from a logistical standpoint. So if you are like an administrator and you're not interested in the, I guess, philosophies behind how we're refereeing this year, then feel free to drop the call now. Because the rest of it is, if I can find the right PowerPoint. So this is a massive PowerPoint that we're using, that we went over with all the referees. I can send it out to you all if you're interested. There's a lot of videos that sort of go along with how we are planning to referee things for the season. So it might be a good resource if you guys are interested. So the entire point of this project and what we're trying to do is sort of have consistency between referees and across all of the matches. Our priorities are the same as they always are. We break the game down into these sort of key areas: scrum, space, breakdown, line out maul, and foul play. And then we sort of have agreed upon ways that we will referee each part of that. I'm not going to run through this whole thing because it will take us 2 hours. The stuff that's most important, I think, for this group is probably to briefly discuss the breakdown, especially ball carrier not releasing or holding on penalties. Because if you watch the Super Series, there were a very high number of those. So does anybody have any questions? So what we were looking at before we reward the poacher, and we do agree with World Rugby and their standpoint that poaching is fun and it makes good rugby, but we also think that we have to hold the defense to a high standard, which means the poacher has to get a lot of things right before they will be rewarded. So the poacher needs to enter the tackle zone legally. They must show a clear release, okay? If we have to have a replay, there was not a clear release. The poacher has to support her weight, and she also needs to be able to lift the ball. So that means she has to get both hands on it and be able to lift, right? It can't just be like 2 hands beyond the ball or the scoop back or 1 hand, or she has to be able to lift. And the final thing that has to happen is the tackler has to be out of the zone. So if we want, we can watch some of these videos. In this one, this is a great penalty. Sorry, I'm not really sure why I just did that, but if you saw the red defender stays on the ball carrier the whole time, really smothers her, and she ends up getting pinged for it. So the ball carrier never had a chance to release.
Sorry?
No, you're good? Okay.
So in that one, you see England never releases. Joy's going to give the holding on penalty. So she rewards the defense when the defender didn't do everything right. There was a lot of this in the Super Series. And this is the last thing that happens, where the poacher comes in good, but the tackler is still laying there. She's impeding the 2 Japanese ruckers from getting there. So they shouldn't have gotten the ball carrier call. Does anybody have questions about this? This is probably the most contentious area currently that we have to ref. All right. There's like 5 or 6 slides on the breakdown, which I won't bore you with here. A lot of it's pretty much the same stuff. Takeouts and holding, we should probably talk about. I didn't see any of this in the, I watched all the All-Star matches this weekend, so I didn't see any of this in the All-Star match, but it was really, really prevalent in the Super Series, which is just the rucker taking beyond the breakdown. Not sure. Turn that volume down there. So we're talking about this right here beyond the ruck. Number 4 blue took him out. So there's a lot more of those. These are actually from the Super Series. England was pretty notorious for it. Did you guys see that? Anybody have questions? Oh, this one's great. You can barely see this one. New Zealand does it and makes a hole for the try. Gonna happen right there on the back. Anybody have questions about that? Okay. This is sort of an important communication that came from World Rugby. So if we're at a tackle where the offside lines have been set, then the offensive player is able to play the ball as long as one foot is level with or behind the ball. At a ruck, the player has to have both feet behind the ball and cannot be bound to the opponent, so they need to be a back person of the ruck. And there's 4 or 5 really nice clips to go along with that explanation. So I'll send this out to you and you can take a look at that. This is another thing that's happening pretty regularly now, that as the ruck has to move backwards, the back line is not moving back as well, the back line of the defense. So see one example of this. All the New Zealand players are going to be offside. As that ruck moves backwards, they do not move backwards, so they were all like 2 or 3 feet offside. Super Series had a couple of in front of kicker, which I also saw at the All-Star match. So, I mean, kicking is fantastic offensive play now, but we do need to make sure that anybody who's chasing comes from behind the kicker. I won't show you those examples. I think I clipped 2 or 3 from the weekend as well in the All-Star matches.
Oh, Amanda, about that one.
Yep. Which?
That person coming from behind can put everyone else on side too, right?
Yes,
even
absolutely.
If they started in front of the kicker, they can just wait?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, as the only time they can't just wait is if they're within 10 meters of where the ball lands, and then they have to actively retreat.
Okay, cool.
I mean, I think technically everybody's supposed to retreat, but yes, unless they're within 10 meters, they'd probably be fine standing and waiting.
Okay.
Materiality, yeah. Let's see, retreating players getting in the way of the scrum half. Just trying to not go through all of this with you guys because it's pretty much a lot. Scrums, our priorities at the scrum are, we are making an effort as a team to set the scrum up for success from the very beginning. So alignment of players so that everybody has a spot to go into. I don't think axial loading has been a problem in women's rugby so far. That's, I think, mostly something that the men have been doing. But we will be watching for the heads on shoulders. If that's happening, it starts at a free kick and it will be escalated from there because World Rugby has issued the directive that that's very dangerous. So there has to be a gap. We're looking for stability, no feet moving. On bind, of course, pushing, cranking, pulling, all of that, no step out. We got to push straight. And the final thing is, of course, the 9 cannot hold the ball as long as they want. Once there's that stability after the set call, the ball needs to be fed. They can't just wait until they're, trying to draw a free kick or a penalty. Oh, yeah, if you get a chance, we really need the 9s to be square to the scrum instead of the hips turned. This is not going to be considered a credible feed in our league, if that makes sense. Sorry, that's really quick. But when you look at the scrum, she should be square to it. She is allowed to stand offset, but her entire body is turned so that when she feeds, she's tossing it under second row. So we're looking for that 9 to have a square body to the scrum, and then we're looking for a strike. Dominance, sort of the buzzword right now. So we are looking to reward dominance at the scrum, but the dominance does have to be legal. We will work with the dominant team. That's sort of our agreement. Like keep your hips in, drive straight, right? Sometimes dominance is its own reward. You're not always going to get a penalty. I don't think we need to talk about anything in the line out or maul. Nothing has really changed there. They are being pretty picky about contact with the jumper in the air. Same as last year, though. When you bring them down, the lifters need to not step in front of the jumper, so no obstruction there, and then the ripper needs to bind to the jumper. That's probably it. Any questions, line out maul? Pretty good. Foul play, I know you've seen the directive from World Rugby. They've given us pretty clear guidelines on how to handle the high tackles and the shoulder charges. It does mean you will probably see more sanctions for high tackles and shoulder charges. And potentially more yellow cards, because virtually any contact with the head or neck, unless it's considered a seatbelt tackle or a low danger situation, they're being escalated to yellows, a lot of them. The other thing within the last year has been the ball carrier and them coming into a situation with the leading elbow. So if that elbow makes contact to the neck or head, they're as liable for penalty as a tackler. The other thing we saw a lot of in the Super Series, which is sort of new to me in watching women's rugby, is neck rolls. It's not something I've really seen up until this season. We had a bunch of them in the Super Series. I think everybody's familiar with them and what they are. But if the player is moved by the neck like that, that's just a yellow card all day long. That's dangerous. I'm sure nobody's actually coaching it right. Lifting cleanouts, that's something we see in men's rugby. We haven't seen much of that with women's rugby. And the final thing we should probably chat about is deliberate knock-ons. And the way that we're adjudicating this is the same as it was last year. Legitimate attempt to catch the ball, that's sort of hard for us to judge. So it's one of the ways that we say it is, could the player regather? If the player was in a position to regather the ball, then it's play on, or if it's knocked forward, it would be a scrum. If there's no realistic chance of regathering the ball, then you're looking at a penalty. And then if there is a line break, that's a yellow card. But that's exactly the same way that we looked at it last season. So that shouldn't be a surprise for anyone. So I'll go ahead and send this out to you guys. It's pretty long, so set aside time to watch the videos and then hit me up with any questions. But that's pretty much all of your time I need to take up. Does anybody have questions with things that they wanted to discuss? Okay, cool. Well, thank you guys so much, and I look forward to
Amanda, before we cut off, this is Mila again. I just wanted to say that, for coaches and the WPL representatives for the teams, it's really important that we get your feedback each week. I'm not sure exactly at this moment what the best feedback method is, if we're going to have weekly forms again the way we did in the past, or just sending emails to Amanda, CCing Carly, or what have you. But we have worked hard to have the pool of referees this year that we have, and to have this model of officials for the league. But it will really only work best if we hear proactive feedback from all of the teams. Both myself and Amanda can only address things if we know about them. So for either me or the other directors or Amanda hearing about things in November, that's not that helpful when all the games have already been played. So please be proactive on a weekly basis of getting your feedback on referees or sort of where you are, so that we can sort of work together to have the best competition and the best officiating we have possibly can. And then additionally, I know that Advantage is down at the moment, but this is something, that the league dollars pay for. I know that a number of teams, but not all teams, used the access to Advantage last year, and it was significant advantage for them. So please, we pay for this. All of the coaches will have access to this, and you are welcome to share your access to other people on your team as you see. This is a great way for captains or assistant referees, or really anyone, to have access to see how the referees are viewing your games, to look at game tape, essentially coded by the referees. And please take advantage of that. And
it was sorry,
go
Mel.
ahead.
No, I was going to say it's a really useful tool for coaches. So if you don't know how to use it, just let me know. I'm more than happy to walk you through it. But you can look at a game and sort it by just scrums or just penalties at the breakdown, or whatever it is that you want to look at. If it's something we code, you can just, that's great help. Just to look at all the scrums, I think, is great. So without all the other stuff. So sorry, Mila.
Oh, no. Thanks. That's great. So yeah, just sort of the final thing is, I know there's a number of coaches on this call, and mostly I talk to administrators for your teams, but just to try to continually put that message out there that both myself and the other directors, Allie, Carly, and Naima, we are always here for y'all and to get your feedback. And we can only see the teams in front of us, which is definitely not all of the teams. So if you don't come forward to tell us if there's an issue, or if you think there's room for improvement, or honestly, it would always be lovely to hear if there's something that's going really well that we should keep doing, then we just won't know about it. That's part of the nature of being spread across the entire country, and a pretty big country at that. So please, feedback is key, especially from coaches. And then the last item I have for coaches specifically is part of our contract with USA Rugby is that we are trying to provide as many resources as possible to coaches, especially through the national team pathway. So please make sure that your WPL representative from your team has your names in our contact list, so that we can be sharing that with Bidewell and the national team pathway, so that the various coaching resources they have available are being shared with you. And if you have additional assistant coaches or, old girls that are stepping into the coaching role that you want to be in that pathway, please let us know, and I can connect you with Bidewell to sort of further that along. I know it's a huge commitment that y'all take on to be a part of the WPL, and definitely not one that is appropriately monetarily compensated. So what we can't make up with in money, we would love to make up for in opportunities, and we are trying our best to increase those year over year. So please make sure you're taking advantage of all those opportunities we're trying to provide for you.
Cool.
Any questions or anything else before we hop out for the night?
Awesome. Thank you, Mila. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alana. Thanks, Alana.
Sure. Bye-bye.